Welcome to the Art Salon talk. We are going to talk about the book Creamier and about related issues. So my name is Craig Garrett. I'm the commissioning editor for contemporary art at Phaidon Press in London. And sitting here with me is Spartacus Chetwynd, who's an artist based in London, Adam Szymczyk, who is the director of the Kunsthalle Basel, and who co-curated the 2008 Berlin Biennial. And then Chus Martínez, who's a chief curator at MACBA in Barcelona, and who's curating the 2010 São Paulo Biennial. So first I'll start off talking about what the book is. The book is called Creamier. This is it. And it's the fifth in a series that Phaidon started in 1998 with a book called Cream. And that was followed a couple years later with Fresh Cream, then Cream 3, and then Ice Cream. And now we have Creamier. Soon we're going to run out of puns on the word cream. The way these books are structured is there are 10 curators from all over the world. In this issue, it's Elena Filipovic, Doug Fogel, Yuki Kamiya, Inez Katzenstein, Chus Martínez, Kitty Scott, Deborah Singer, Adam, Catherine Wood, and Tirdad. Each of the 10 curators selects 10 artists and writes about those 10 artists. And each artist gets 2 spreads showing their work. And then each curator also selects a source work, which could be a work of art, or a novel, or a film trilogy, in this case, that they feel is particularly relevant or inspirational for the artists they've selected and for artists who are working right now. And then there's extensive end matter with artist biographies. The idea is that it's almost like a biennial in a book, and a snapshot of what's happening in contemporary art at the moment. All of the artists are emerging, and in past issues of Creamier, of Cream, the artists have gone on to be actually quite the important artists who are really running the scene right now. So in a way, it's sort of telling the future, in a sense. So I thought we would discuss some issues that many of the artists in the book are working around, if that's all right with you guys. And I thought I'd start off with the first question, that looking in Creamier compared to the previous Cream books, a lot of the artists in this particular book, they incorporate performance in one way or another in the work, in some ways that are quite obvious, in other ways that are less traditional in terms of different mediums like sculpture and photography and things like that. So I guess I'll start with Chus. What new challenges does this increasing reliance on performance create for curators in a system that is really based around objects?
I suppose that the same as always. I don't think that there is any increasing number of performers art out there. It's only that perhaps now we are more attentive, or differently attentive. We are not more attentive, or even more prepared to incorporate it in exactly the same manner as you would incorporate an object or any other media into an exhibition or into a context, museum or non-museum, institution or not institution. So I don't really think that there is more or less. I really think that it's just a question of a critical attitude, and also how performance is seen as another turn of the screw of perhaps even institutional critique. So it's not only about being against or in favor of the object, but just it's another way of actualizing the space where the exhibition takes place, or actually actualizing art practice, and then countering between the viewer, the artist, the space, and many other issues. So I think it has, perhaps it was a moment where the market was also very high, that perhaps people was not very interested in collecting performances. But even that, it has been historically possible. So it does exist. There is museums that collect performances or things like that. So I don't believe there is any increase in number, but perhaps a different critical understanding of the importance of it.
And Adam?
Yeah. Well, of course, there's a substantial difference between the object that lasts and the performance that happens, but that doesn't mean that the system, as you said, has not managed to incorporate performance so far. And I think the system has been built around notions of process and situation, at least since late 60s. So I don't really see. I mean, of course, there is a certain return of you know, object fetish in the recent boom in contemporary art, but I don't think that this really affects the performance artists who are producing the work towards different parameters than those of objects present in the museum. And of course, museums are and institutions have to react to the fact that there is performance as part of the artist practice, and some of them have their departments created especially for the performance, and of course also institutions try to deal with performance not as a marginal part in their activities, but actually giving space and time, because this is time-based arts, to performance artists to present their work not only as a footnote to exhibitions, but quasi as exhibitions. Exhibition of performance is a contradiction in terms, maybe, but it's an interesting contradiction, and maybe it's important to operate in this kind of friction between the institution and the temporality of the institution, and then different temporalities that performances have.
Yeah, it seems like there's some museums who are trying to go out of their way to figure out how to make an exhibition that can incorporate performance. I know that Tate Modern has had an exhibition a couple of years ago, The World as a Stage.
So I'm just getting an indication that we're not speaking loudly enough.
Okay, right.
Is that for everyone?
Okay.
Speak louder?
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Okay.
we were told that the sound system is able to help us.
Right, some museums, some institutions are trying to go out of their way to make exhibitions that maybe incorporate performance in relatively new ways. And I think, I don't know, Spartacus, maybe this is something you could answer, is do you think that that museums and curators have tried to come up with novel ways to incorporate performance into their exhibitions?
Yes, I can answer. Can you hear me, everyone? Yes? Even louder? Okay. I can agree that I think seems to be that there is an acceptability with the performance not being treated as the poor relation that no one knows how to deal with. And especially in Europe, I've found that, rather than Britain, if I'm allowed to say that, in my experience. And then I'd also say that there are some key tactics that I think young artists use, and me included. And it's not necessarily to do with presentation of performance within a museum or within a show, which I can tell you those as well. But maybe if we're still talking, it's not relevant to talking about. Yes?
No,
continue?
Yeah, please.
Okay. I was thinking that maybe there was an increase of performances recently, and I wondered if, to some extent, it could be because of the millennium turning, the 2000, and the impending doom of a new century, and maybe everyone feeling a bit crazy, and therefore being more expressive and desperate, but it is reasonably a joke. And then the next point was that I thought that there's a tactic where it's so hard to in any way be seen that, or to get visibility or some sort of, it's like an attention-seeking game to possibly do something live and performative. So I think that a lot of young artists are actually doing performative things as a tactic. Is that accepted, or we're all going to take that on? And then another element I thought was really that performance and the object, which is what you were talking about a little bit, unless I've misunderstood, that there's this idea that maybe the more performances are in some way related to objects and the usual art market. And I would say that that could be possible because when you're making products for a performance, they have a different end product context. Rather than being in a gallery on display, they're actually just made for the moment of the performance, for the live event. So instead of just making something in your moment of creativity that will eventually be on a stand in an art fair or in a gallery, you're slightly changing your trajectory and your intention. So you might be fully aware that the product will at one point end up in an art fair or in a gallery, but you're allowing your creativity to be sort of blindfolded a little bit because it's the drive to make the product is actually for the live event. Mm. Does that make sense at all? Mm-hmm.
It actually relates to something that Catherine Wood said in the discussion that starts off the book. She said that production now is more than ever characterized by a self-consciousness about artistic labor and the weighing of an artist's persona against the production of objects themselves. The idea that today there's a more performative attitude about art production, even among artists who are not performance artists.
Yeah. No, that was really well put, I think.
Yeah.
That was really good.
Yes, thank you, Catherine.
Yeah, I thought that was good.
Yeah.
But also, I don't know if you know the work of Phila de Barlow. Yes. She was, yes?
Some.
She's my tutor when I was at art college, and she's very well known as a sculptor, but she presented her work as that she makes huge physical, almost not like Christo, but hugely physically sort of wrapping a hedge in the countryside in plastic bags. And she realized when she was doing it on her own that it's incredibly sort of performative, theatrical process. And so I have come across those ideas very much, that there's a level where it's confused and interesting in itself. The productivity, mm-hmm. Yeah, really good, really interesting.
Yeah.
I think.
Okay. Maybe I'll...
I just want to add one thing.
Yeah.
Which is like, on the one hand, it's true that it seems kind of new and there is probably a new attitude, and it has to do with all that you just named. But also, if we look at it historically, for example, if you look at contexts like Spain, the only moments of modernity that were dealing with experimentation, that were outside the academia and outside painting, was performances and different ways of understanding the performatic. So in collections like in ours, for example, the performance or the recopilation of information, documents, objects, testimonies, writing about this performance, because you cannot reenact them many times, or they cannot be remade, but anyhow, they are present in the collection. They are at the core of a collection. So when you include performance today in an exhibition, you are not including it in parallel to anything. You are actually including it because they are the main source of another way of structuring some kind of understanding of things which are vital to the collection, which is understanding of the experiment in itself, what does it mean, the position of the inside and the outside, not only of the audience, but also versus academia, the production of knowledge versus the object and outside the object, so all these kind of questions. And in that sense, I think that, of course, there is perhaps a new context, and but it's also very interesting to look at, new methodologies and ways where you can also collect and look at it historically, and not kind of make the present so flat. So.
That is a good point. Adam, do you have anything else to say about performance?
Yeah, I mean, I can only perhaps relate to the experience of the previous Berlin Biennial, in which we included a program of events which were not only performances but also all kinds of talks and meetings and guided tours and all sorts of things, to which we gave this name, My Nights Are More Beautiful Than Your Days, and that was a program of night events, actually, because we wanted to sort of take out these activities from the day, from the zone of light, and move them into the night, and in this way underline their more ephemeral character. So I think that there are formats that must be created also to present performance and related activities in art to the audience, and not only on the side of art exhibitions of a kind during the opening days, or as kind of events punctuating the duration of the show, so to say.
Okay. Well, I thought the other thing that really stood out for me when I was looking at the artists, especially the two of you chose for the book, is quite a number of them incorporate historical research in their work, sometimes in a really conspicuous way, as in the videos of Zachary Formwalt, and then sometimes in a more oblique way, like in Maria Loboda's sculptures. And in your text that you wrote about these works, you do identify, you include some of this historical background to their works. And it's interesting when you walk around the fair and you see these works, or you see them in an exhibition, sometimes that historical information isn't really available to you as a viewer. And I was wondering what you thought about, do you think as a curator, I guess I'll start with Adam. As a curator, do you think that it's your responsibility to make that historical information available to the viewer in some way, whether it's by wall text or pamphlet or some other way?
Well, I don't think that there's more extra information necessary to understand any work that is using archival or historical material than to any other work, and I don't think that there is many works of art at all that are interesting, that are kind of providing this kind of in-the-face gratification instantly to the viewers, and therefore I don't think that the new methods of dealing with works that are using what you called historical research are needed to introduce these works to the audience, because I hope that artists are still producing these works with intention to communicate some content to the audience and not to create this kind of cryptic messages in bottles that don't reach any addressees in the end. And I guess it's, I would rather say that it's, I would say that it's a duty of the viewer to get informed and to find out about the works, as it is my duty as a curator to understand the work of an artist when I see it for the first time. And whether I should share this information or not with audience at large, that I'm not so certain. Why should I assume this privileged position of somebody who is kind of sending little doses of information to those who see the artwork? I'd rather leave it to the moment when the viewer or visitor to the museum is encountering the work, and I think the exhibition should be rather a place of encounters with artworks where some kind of meaningful experience is possible, than the place where through reading of wall text I get like kind of more or less accurate information about what this combination of objects on the table really mean.
Well, I was thinking for like a specific example, last year at the Kunsthalle there was a show, Jan Vo, who's also in the book, and I think reading his text in the book, you find out about his own personal history and his family history, which are quite important to his work. But sometime when the first times I encountered his work, I didn't know that information, and the work it existed on a much more narrow level for me. And then once I found out a bit more about his own personal history and how he incorporates that into his work, with much wider histories as well, it kind of brought the work to life for me in a way.
But all this information that has been provided in the book by Danvo is the information that the artist wanted to provide. So it's not that I leave it entirely to the artist to decide, what we should know about the work, but I think it's an interesting case where actually the knowledge or text of literature or some documentary material becomes part of the work that is complementary to the objects that are on view, and only the whole combination of the objects on view and the text to be read makes the work. Mm.
Yeah, I guess there's some. Well, I don't know, Chus, have you had experience with that? Like at MACBA, for example, do you tend to have wall labels in your exhibitions?
No, we are not exactly a good example of this kind of displaying information that goes along the lines of what Adam said, meaning on the one hand, if your practice is based on research, as a curator, it's normal that you actualize historical sources. But the presence of historical material together with contemporary material is then not to correct or to capitalize history, but actually to actualize it, to make it actual again. In that sense, how you decide to display this information is a decision which is today quite complex. But I always think that it's a responsibility which is shared in between the institution and the viewer. So it's not only the institution, which is a service provider, and I am acting pedagogically, and then I provide you all this information and then you read it. There is many, many ways. So if you are using this material right, first, the material tends to talk by itself and inside a context. Secondly, you need, of course, to create context where the viewer can access more if they need more. But I don't think particularly that a wall text is better than, for example, a seminar or a discussion or guide tours or many other ways of introducing the work for those who think that they need to have some kind of guidance or some kind of being accompanied by. So we need also to be more and more imaginative and how we understand what information is and means. Also along the lines of education. I don't think that is so straightforward.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because I mean the traditional way is sort of you see the exhibition and then you buy the exhibition catalog and then you read the text, and that sort of that's the really traditional sort of straightforward didactic frozen way that it's been for a long time. But I think that
yeah, but imagine if you're really if imagine an exhibition that really interests you. If you manage to interest the people, you manage to activate some kind of, let's say, curiosity machine going on, and then you really search for it. Yeah. This is how it always works. Yeah. It does not work or better just because you put text on walls. Yeah. Meaning, even if putting text on wall may help, and perhaps you need text, but who knows where. But what is really, really important is not to ask where the information is available, but that the information should be available, but actually, if you are able to create curiosity for it. If you're not even curious, I think everyone is Googling everything, or everyone is just searching and looking after information if they feel they need it. Yeah. So why should it be different in the context of an exhibition? Yeah. I don't see any difference at all. Yeah, and some museums, I think, go overboard in terms of writing huge long wall text in every room of the exhibition. Yeah. I think that Tate Modern especially is...
I can tell you what I like. Okay. I love information. My favorite hobby is like watching documentaries and taking notes. So I really enjoy information. It's great. And then when I go to see a show, normally it's when I don't understand anything and I just feel really embarrassed by being left out of not getting the work in any way, that I then try and find the little room that's set aside with the documentary about the artist or some sort of like catalogue and everything like this. But it's quite often that I really have to seek out the information. I really enjoy the fact that it's there, but I understand what you're saying. It doesn't need to like be dominating and sort of telling anyone how to read the work. But I really appreciate when there are access places so that you can somehow get a grip on something that you have no clue about.
Yeah.
And I'm educated. I did 2 degrees. but you know what I mean? Sometimes
No,
you just don't get...
I'm not saying that you should just hide anything. I'm just saying that there is plenty of ways to make accessibility that is not because you put a billboard with text next to a word that you are making any favor to anybody, to the work or to the viewer. So it's a very complex relationship, and I think that, meaning I'm working in a museum, I think there is a sense of responsibility towards the audience that the audience should be able to access. But it's also very important that you educate people into a degree of curiosity, and that you also educate the museum in putting the information where the information should be, and also directing the audience towards the public programming, the guided tours, and the catalogs, the texts which are available. So there's thousands of different ways.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
I've recently come across the woman architect, Lino Bobardi, who's obviously very fashionable now, but I'd never heard of her before. But she seems to have fantastic liberal and insightful ways to make an audience enjoy something that's maybe seen to be academic or cut off.
Yeah, like the first very simple maneuver that she performed on the collection actually of the museum in Sao Paulo was by hanging the paintings from the collection with these transparent glass panels, and
really good, really
you know,
nice.
without really telling people what the painting is about, she was able to show the sort of reverse of the painting that is always hidden from view, and this is like, you know, just it's a performative maneuver through which you make all information available that is normally available only to the museum specialists.
Yeah.
So, of course, there are very interesting ways of dealing with artworks directly in exhibitions that I think can tell much more about the works than a sort of learned or cursory description of the work by a curator.
No, really nice. I think also when I read your question, I don't know if we're meant to let everyone know that we were allowed to know the questions before, but I read the question and something jumped into my head that I would love that the artist exhibiting was allowed to do like screenings of films that were relevant to their work or things like that, which obviously
exists. This is exactly what we are trying to do at the Kunsthalle Basel, where
really
we basically invite each artist showing at Kunsthalle to present a program of films or whichever other
no, that sounds great.
type of media that is related or tangentially related to the exhibition.
Because then that would be, rather than telling anyone exactly, explaining it so clearly, you could go and see the show and then you could see the films around it. Would be, I'd like that.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it's sort of different ways that open up the work to interpretations instead of closing them down with a really rigid interpretation of what it's about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was just thinking, I've been to the show at MACBA. It was of a Spanish pop artist during the time of Franco. I don't know the name of the show.
Joan Rabascal.
I loved it, but I did go with my Spanish Basque friend who told me sort of in my ear as I went around as much information as I would want to know. It was really enjoyable, really enjoyed it.
So one thing I wanted to touch on, if we have time, fairly quickly, with the two curators here, is because this book is about the process of curating, in a way about selecting artists, is what your system is for curating, whether researching new artists is something that you do every day, or whether it's something that you sort of reserve periods to, say, maybe travel and do research, or whether it's completely driven by an exhibition and some kind of a project that you're working on.
Well, that's well, it depends to person, but I think that, you know, research is part of life, or it isn't. Meaning, it's not that you go to your desk and start only answering telephone calls and emails, but you try as much as the work allows also to invest some time in understanding ideas and context, and also doing research, going to the archive, even to your own archive, even a studio visit, even investing in conversations with artists as much as you can. Like, research is this, is to invest your time and to really try to connect not only the material with the material, but the material with ideas, and then all of it with an audience and to create a context for it. So I think it's basic, I suppose, but that depends on person to person.
Right. So you'd say all the time, more or less, every day?
Well, yes, every day, because in every exhibition bit and in every work, you need to examine every aspect as much as you can. I think, you know, the day is limited, but I would totally advocate for research more and more. But I am a total believer. And research is not library. Research means to invest in understanding ideas and not to stop at facts. So to give things time, also to come over them, not thinking, for example, that if you exhibit a work once, it cannot be exhibited again. That's also research. Research is an attitude towards the new and towards the past that should be kind of projecting propositions into the future. So research is thinking. So yes, thinking is something that you do every day.
Yeah, most people, not all. What about you, Adam?
It's hard to disagree, and I think I would only add that most interesting information in recent years I got from the artists. So the artists with whom I work, you know, I always ask a lot. You know, what would be their, quite literally, what would be their tips for future projects in terms of people that they like, you know, look into the work of, and very often I get very interesting advice or that I can then use, and I think it's a kind of way of also quite organically growing with the artists that you show, which for me is important because having worked in a sort of more like a gallery context before, or a smaller institution, it became increasingly more important for me to have a certain continuity in working with artists, and the institution imposes a certain regime of novelty and change that you are supposed to apparently somehow follow, which means that you have to reinvent yourself and your institution with each new show. And recently I'm trying to busy myself with like doing exactly the opposite. So like a little bit like stopping and going back to certain things that I've already tried, or you know, the artists that I worked before, and I'm kind of much investing in the idea of productive repetition, or you know, reconsidering things rather than trying to find the new and newest things. You know, so that's why this book of Phaidon poses a certain problem for me, because this is presenting 10 emerging artists, and I find it very hard to understand in which degree or at which level of emerging they are,
And from where?
And from where they emerged, from the you know, from some kind of abyss, I suppose, of not being recognized or what, I don't know. So I think it's a book about the artists who emerged, or you know, who are in the process of making very interesting work, and the novelty aspect of it is a marketing aspect that doesn't really, you know, it doesn't make us too excited about it. We are far more excited about the work individually. I suppose.
No, that's true. Well, we do intentionally leave it open, I think, for interpretation, what it means to be emerging, but the idea is that it is sort of what is happening now, and what the artists that will be significant in the years to come. And other curators in the past, in the previous edition of Cream, the Wrong Gallery chose all emerging artists over the age of 60. So there's different ways. There's different ways to approach it. I think we're almost out of time, but I thought I'd ask the audience if anybody has a question they'd like to ask. Over there. No. Oh, sorry.
Can I ask something?
Yes.
It leads on from your question, but how did you directly meet the artists that you put forward?
That what?
How did you meet the artist that you put? How did you? Is that too direct a question?
Well, no, I guess. I mean, how did you discover, or meet, or come across the 10 artists that you selected for the book?
Well, you don't discover anybody. Meaning, it's this kind of listening, no? Like, for example, Yvonne Alamberri. It's really non-emergent. I know him since 10 years, 12 years. I've been also working in the Basque Country. The first day I arrived into the Basque Country to work, another very good artist told me, like, you need to meet somebody. It's called Yvonne Alamberri, and it's probably the best artist I know. And you should do a studio visit with him. And I did it, and that's it. And then I arrived 2 years ago in Barcelona, and then I met with, I really thought that it was a really problematic art scene going on, probably because of the Fine Art Academy, for many reasons, which are very difficult and complex to explain here. And then I start to Google what some artists were doing in some apartments, and they were filming themselves, doing performances. And then I just sent an email to one of them asking if they would allow me to do a studio visit or to have a conversation or a coffee with me. And then they came. I think I was having an apartment with 15 people show up because they were a group.
Yeah.
And then we were like spending some afternoons together, and one of them said, like, but the very, very interesting one is that guy called Miguel Noguera, which is doing these ultra shows every Friday in the balcony of his house, filming himself, explaining very, very simple ideas that has to do with the Spanish language and the use of Spanish language in the street and in the media. And then I just sent him an email, and then he has a blog. And then I met him, and then we start to develop a conversation, and we did one thing together as far. Also because he thinks that he needs his time, and also because it's very important not to capitalize this energy that has been created outside the museum. And I work in an institution, so I don't want to incorporate it right now into my track. So, you know, there is several...
But that's really made me feel good, what you've just said, to be honest with you. Because it's what scares you as a non-emerging or soon-to-emerge artist, is that you worry that the people at the sort of intelligentsia end don't bother to access other kind of sources, and that it's only through art fairs or other kind of already prepared platforms. But it's just, I just was interested in what you'd say, but it's really, that's made me feel good.
Yeah, but I think that is probably along the lines of what Adam said. There's also a problem in these kind of products because the research sometimes that does not come really on top of the surface of, and then you don't, it just looks like a very sexy list of people. And this is just the worst, I think, because it's really not about it.
But I have a particular weird view on London because of punk and the idea of street culture and fashion. I think that London has a history of people from the sort of cultural end looking to the street for contact. And I just wondered if it happens in other countries. But mainly through other artists, it sounds like people have connections.
Yeah, it depends.
Okay. So we're going to stop now. I have one very quick question before we go. Speaking of trying to get ideas from interesting channels, I was wondering if any of you had a suggestion for the next title of the book in our Cream series. We're running out of puns on the word cream.
Like that?
Yeah.
Sangria?
UHT?
Shaving cream?
Shaving cream, okay. You can email me. Okay, well, there we go.
Well, that's good.
Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you.